everyone. Welcome to Here on Earth. My name is Marley Daintree. I am your host. I am here today with Maria Runyon. Maria is the founder of Root Cause Energetics, where she helps individuals and families decode the deeper emotional and energetic roots of chronic symptoms through bioenergetic testing, miasmatic homeopathy, and German New Medicine. Her work is deeply informed by her own healing journey as a mother when her son's severe eczema sparked a relentless search for answers and ultimately led her to the transformative teachings of GNM. Through that experience, Maria not only witnessed physical healing, but also a profound restoration of trust, connection, and nervous system balance. Today, she brings the same depth and insight to her clients with advanced training in frameworks and modalities like GNM, emotion code, metaphysical anatomy, kinesiology. Maria blends science, intuition, and compassion to guide others through their own root level transformation. She believes every symptom has meaning and that true healing begins where we feel safe, supported enough to listen. Thank you so much for joining me, Maria.
It's an honor. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to connect and deliver some insights to your audience.
Yeah, I'm excited too. We connected after I saw a number of Instagram posts of yours that were really interesting and sort of the next level of GNM. Can you tell me a bit more about how you started doing this and a bit more about your journey of finding German New Medicine and how that influenced your work?
Yes. So it wasn't a very straightforward journey, and German New Medicine wasn't love at first sight for me. It wasn't landing as easy as I thought it would, and it started with I was born in Europe, so I grew up living biologically in a small village with my family. And then my mother actually has been involved in the German New Medicine community in Hungary for the past 15 years. And she's been trying to kind of encourage me to take it in and get involved as much as I could, but I couldn't really relate. And when my second child was born, he had very severe eczema, and I was disconnected from my family because I moved to the US at the time, and I was newly married, and then we were living with my in-laws. Everything happened so fast, and I had my first child. I was 6 months pregnant when I came to the US, and then shortly after I had my second. Then he presented with these symptoms, and my mother was trying to tell me that, oh, it's separation conflict. It's it has to do something with your separation, and in most of the German New Medicine communities, it's very black and white. It's separation, and that's what it is. And it didn't really sit well with me or resonate with me because I was with this child from the moment he was born, every single day. So for me, it's like, it can't be separation because it didn't make sense. And so we went down the allopathic route first, and we were doing steroids and allopathic testing and all the other things, elimination diet, but nothing really worked. Nothing really helped. So we pulled him off the medications, and then that followed this nightmare of oozing skin, bloody sheets, nonstop scratching, this really terrible times. And I still couldn't connect with the German New Medicine side because I wasn't also in a position to kind of admit that I have anything to do with this, because it was a very hard situation to be in. And I was trying to look for outside help and outside solutions to kind of see how we can resolve this without really looking deeper. So when one day when I really kind of connected with this through all the research I have done, and we really went down to all different rabbit holes. We did the functional medicine, we did even muscle testing, and then I stumbled upon bioenergetics. And then as I really went deeper into the homeopathy side and bioenergetics, there were patterns that were showing that it was truly separation. And I was just looking into it and how that was coming up. And it showed that pattern of when I understood that it's not only separation, but it could be disconnection. And it's not only physical, it could be emotional. So I really, there was this moment when I was able to connect it, where I saw the truth of how my pregnancy was and how I felt through my pregnancy, how unsupported, unstable, and resentful I felt, how I was going through these patterns of thinking that even maybe this pregnancy was a mistake, that maybe he shouldn't be here, maybe this wasn't meant to be. And I was going through my postpartum journey with really deep postpartum depression and all those very hard times where I couldn't be fully present for my child. So when I was going through those moments, I really understood, I really didn't see, we didn't have that connection. So later, when I stumbled upon this wider lens of German New Medicine, when we are looking more into the not just the physical disconnection and physical separation, but also the emotional and perceived separation, is where everything started to make sense. And when I saw the truth that how my emotional rupture and disconnection in our bond had something to do with his eczema, then it all made sense. And I couldn't look at him the same way after that. Something in me just softened, and I was able to be there for him like I was never before. And the most amazing thing happened afterwards is that in a week or so, his entire body cleared up, and there was no sign of any skin rash or any kind of discoloring, anything. It was just gone. And I realized that there's something in here that has to go deeper than just recognizing the conflict. There's always something energetic behind it. There's something that the emotions are there, and then this deeper patterns of connection that are perceived and felt by children, especially, very strongly. And when I realized that is when we were able to move past it and heal in miraculous ways. So I took this into my practice as well, and then I started doing my testing in a different way, when I looked at not just the conflict itself, but also looking at what are the deeper patterns. Are they inherited? Are they absorbed? Are they also present in the mother, father, family? So when we looking at these patterns and they're emerging in the people who we are connected to, then we can really find a different level of healing.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much for sharing. That's such a good story of a GNM.
Yeah.
Sorry, sad story for your son's eczema, but yeah, such a good example. Um, I often wonder, like, why do some people love GNM straight away, and why do some people resist it? And I've sort of wondered, does it depend who you hear it from? And
Yeah.
sort of like, yeah, I know that I found German New Medicine from Dr. Melissa Sell's page, and I really like her and Stephen, her partner's sort of work, and the way that they're like, something that they always say is like consciousness over matter. And I appreciate that sort of framework, because when I've heard GNM explained by other people, sometimes I'm like, oh, it's a bit more complex than that, isn't it? Like, and um yeah, and thank you for sharing about your pregnancy. I think that I know that I can relate as well to that, of like, sometimes pregnancy is full on and you're like, am I ready for more children? And then I feel like there's so much guilt that comes with that when that baby comes, and you're like, oh, how could I have doubted this? But at the same time,
Yes, and there's a lot
it's
of
something.
things that we also, when it comes to consciousness, we also see how our children mirror things back to us. And there is this study that was done, and it revealed how firstborn and thirdborn and fifthborn and so on children, they carry the subconscious voids of the mother, and the second, fourth, and sixth, they carry the subconscious voids of the father. So when we see these, then they are actually mirroring back to us what we weren't able to resolve so far. So with my son's journey, that was very interesting too, that my son, he's a second born child into this family. So he carries the subconscious voids of my husband. And my husband has been through a lot of separation and a lot of abandonment through his childhood when his parents were divorced. And it's really just showing how much he didn't or wasn't able to process during this time. And so it wasn't just my pregnancy with him, but also
Oh.
what my feelings towards him during the pregnancy and those early bonds represented when it comes from what he carried from my husband's consciousness.
Wow. Yeah. So I've heard that before. So it's first, third, fifth is
Yeah, so the odd-born
mother.
children are mother, and
Yeah.
it could be a little bit more complicated too when it comes to individual interpretations. So that is when, what we can do with the type of testing that I do, that we are really tapping into the subconscious of the person.
Mm.
And we translate that frequency so we could see the enmeshment of the two sides too, because it's not just the father, but who
Mm.
is more prevalent, who weighs more on this scale is usually the first. Those odd-born children are usually more heavily relying on the mother's side, and then
Mm.
the other ones are more heavily reliant on the father's side.
And then is that each pregnancy that the woman has had, like, so miscarriages or abortions
They also
count?
count, but they also
Yeah.
it also comes into consideration when they are from that union. So if
Yeah.
from that union, is it the firstborn or is it the secondborn? So it could be that comes more into family constellations, which is a totally different realm. It's a different framework and thing to use to translate things and bring things up to the surface. But when it comes to the interpretation through miasmatic homeopathy, which is basically the inherited patterns that we carry and how those come to surface. So that would be interesting to
Mm.
also go into.
Yeah, so interesting. Um, so what do you do with people? Like, you do this testing and then you use all of your toolbox to sort of figure out what's going on and how do we
Yeah,
resolve?
so basically I use the bioenergetic testing side, and when I do my testing, it reveals certain frequencies, because we are necessarily, when we do this type of testing, we are basically communicating with the subconscious directly, and the subconscious communicates in frequency, not plain English. So here's where I come in, where I kind of learn the language, how to translate those frequencies into plain English so we can understand the pattern and the patterns and this soup of frequencies that came up for this person, and what do they represent, and how can we translate that to understand what is the bigger picture, what is the full story. So I built specific scans to look into the kidneys, so we can look into those existence and abandonment conflicts very deeply and see what kind of tissues come up, what resonates, and how deeply it resonates. Is it something that has been carried in the lineage, or is it something that has happened in this person's life? Is it something that is more on the surface? Is it something that is very deep and identity level? So that's when we kind of get a glimpse into how how we can resolve things and what the body's priority is at the moment, because there's a lot of constellations and a lot of conflicts that we carry, but when it comes to healing, it's what is the most important. And usually when people are in the GNM circles, they say like, oh, heal KCT first, or the kidney collecting tubules first, because that affects everything else. But what if the body has a different plan? What if there is something that is more important in that sense that would influence a lot of other things? So we would look into, for each specific person, we could look into the intestines, the skin, the kidneys, the connective tissues, the pancreas, the bones. So we could really see these biological meanings and emotional symbolism that comes up, and certain maybe microbes show up on the testing and with a different marker. So I know that that specific bacteria or that specific fungal organism or parasite or anything else, it doesn't mean that the person is infested. It means that that carries a specific pattern, that if the person carries the same frequency pattern in the emotional way, then those are magnets to each other. So they will attract and they will stay with the person. So if and once we are able to shift and decode and understand, then there's no detoxing necessary, because they will
Mm.
automatically leave and as the shift is happening, because they no longer are compatible with each other.
Mm. That is so fascinating. Uh, it's so interesting. So, do you use a machine for scanning?
Yes, I have my own technology that I purchased, and then I kind of customize the software to build specific scans for each person and then translate those based on their case, for whatever they need. And then we can go into all these different patterns, and we can look into whether they have any kind of nutritional needs that need to be met during the phase that they're in, and what do they resonate with more. And then also when it comes to nutrient deficiencies, let's say vitamin D resonates for someone and it resonates low, because I can also tell whether it resonates low physically or it's more like an energetic or utilization issue where the body is having an issue transporting or taking up that nutrient. So it points us to the right direction of where we should be looking at. And each nutrient carries an energetic pattern of what they need. So vitamin D in this example would be that maybe the person is not allowing themselves to shine. Maybe they are not stepping into their own light. And then when we look at that pattern, we understand why they are not able to take up that vitamin D and assimilate and use in their own body, because they're not allowing themselves to step into that light that they are meant to be stepping into.
Mm.
So that
Yeah,
that
wow.
could be for any other nutrient too. So every single nutrient, just like every single thing, carries their own energetic frequency and their own energetic pattern. So when we understand this and we come with that knowledge, and the subconscious brings up these nutrients to the screen, I can see why they are coming up. And when we are having a consultation and we lay this out clearly in a bigger picture, then the person understands, like, oh, okay, so I don't need to supplement with vitamin D. I just need to shoot the pattern that allows my body to do what it needs to do to take that vitamin D up
Mm.
and
Yeah.
utilize it correctly.
So I bought a Healy machine a few years ago. It
Oh,
sounds,
awesome.
yeah, but I was fascinated by it. Like I was like, yeah, this is amazing. It matches up with other things, other modalities that I understand, but I didn't. But I'm feeling now like I should get it out and play with it more because I never really I don't know, I just sort of gave up because I didn't really know what lots of the readings meant after a while. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I also
it's
saw
a
it.
complex thing to translate for sure. I work with a lot of
Yeah.
people who have Rife machines, and they already purchased the Rife machine, but they don't know how to program it and they don't know
Mm.
what they need. So that's where I come in, and then I have specific types of testings or scans developed for that, so I can know exactly how to program their machine to
Mm.
what they need to be exposed to. So frequency medicine it can be very simplified. It doesn't have to be hard when you know exactly how to communicate with the subconscious and know what you need.
Yeah. Yeah, so interesting. I remember hearing another podcast years ago about the frequency of minerals and things, and that was really eye-opening to me. Think,
Yeah.
yeah, having an understanding of like, and I guess that's another complicated one. Like in German New Medicine, it's like, so your illness and healing and conflicts and everything come from conflict shocks, but at the same time, if you're deficient in something, does that mean that you are more likely to experience, like you're more likely to perceive things a certain way, or the other way around of like, do conflict shocks make you deficient in things and then that affects your perception? Would you, is there a few like minerals or nutrients that you could go through other than vitamin D, what they mean and how that
Yeah, sure.
interacts
Like
with conflicts?
that is exactly true. Like that's exactly how this is a two-way street, and then it's everything is kind of like interconnected when it comes to this, and that's why it's nice to see the bigger picture because we're not only going with let's say a specific mineral, we are also going with whatever else shows up and why and how
Mm.
that like if there's a certain tissue layer that shows up, then it points us to a certain conflict, and then we're not only looking at conflicts per se, we are also uncovering what is the deepest core beliefs and conditioning that shape the person's perception that allowed the conflict to happen in the first place. Because if we're looking at the perception level, for example, if you are feeling or your belief is that you are unlovable, then you are much more prone to perceive certain conflicts as like lost conflicts as abandonment. Or if your core belief says that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, then a lot of life events can end up registering as self-devaluation. So that's why perception matters. And certain minerals and other nutrients, they carry that pattern. So they can or they cannot be compatible with it. So for example, you cannot take up enough iron in your cells if you are dealing with an XYZ conflict. So it always goes hand in hand with German New Medicine as well, with what the conflicts mean and what the biological purpose of that is and what the nutrient and mineral would do in the body. So if your body's way of so if you're experiencing, let's say, an attack conflict, then your body has to build up that armor, so it will intervene with the iron uptake and iron utilization. So that's where we would see a lot of iron circulating and not being carried to the cells as it's needed.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
also there is like the heavy metals, for example. That's a very controversial topic because there is a lot of people who are actively trying to detox these heavy metals. Let's say mercury comes up, and when I see mercury resonating, it's not necessarily that the body is toxic of mercury or there is something going wrong with the body. It's just that there is as I said before, it's just that the body is resonating at a certain frequency that is being a magnet to the mercury, so it cannot leave. And in the process of that, when that pattern resonates, it also affects certain pathways that would help the mercury leave, but now they can't. Now it can't. So
Mm.
when it comes to mercury, it kind of people who usually hold on to mercury, they are more kind of feeling emotionally poisoned or emotionally being a, like lost trust within themselves. So those would be the patterns that would go with mercury. And also like that boundary violation is also very prevalent when I see people with mercury toxicity. And when we look into those patterns, we can understand what the perception is, what the beliefs are. And when we are able to shift those with somatic inquiry or other somatic practices, then we can go into shifting and healing and detoxing in a very natural way instead of chelating and instead of taking binders and instead of putting extra strain on the body.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I know that I've also heard of people like getting the brain scan like to find out what their original conflict is. But then they're like, oh, so that was my original conflict shock. But then like what set me up to perceive it that way? And then they're still like they still don't know what to do with that information. I think that's why what you're saying is so um, interesting and useful. Yeah, because, and I often think about this as well. Like in my first two pregnancies, I vomited constantly. And from a German New Medicine lens, I saw it as like an indigestible morsel or something to do with like my mother or my maternal line. But then it's like I have all these friends where I feel like they've got really similar issues to me, but they don't vomit in their pregnancy. So I'm like, what about my perception made it this way and then their perception made them have this other symptom? Like,
Yeah. And
It
it
is
always
so.
comes down to how you perceived your own motherhood too. Like, how
Mm,
hard was it for you to kind of digest and assimilate the transformation of you becoming a mother or a mother of two? So, for example, for me, I had a lot of morning sickness or everyday sickness or all day sickness, I would call it, because I was vomiting for 6 months and then I didn't know why. But for me, it was a huge, looking back, for me, it was a huge transformation that like basically transferred my whole life, like my identity and everything else. And that shift was not always in every moment met with full acceptance. And that resistance created all this indigestible morsel kind of conflict that every day I was welcoming the experience but not welcoming at the same time, and like kind of the worries and all the other things come in, that we're not fully trusting the experience, we're not trusting what we are intake what we are taking in and what is happening in our bodies. And then that um misalignment can easily lead to the perception of, I can't digest this. There's just so much happening. There's just too much to take in as transformation.
mm, mm. So yeah, my first child, my son, I vomited all the way through until his birth. Then my daughter, I vomited all the way through until her birth. And then I got pregnant again, and I was so terrified of being sick that I actually stopped the pregnancy at 6 weeks. And then I was so devastated. And then I went and got pregnant again straight away. And then I vomited for 14 weeks. And then my maternal grandmother died. And I don't know if this is legit, but I stopped vomiting like 2 days later. And I felt like, oh, was there something there? Or I don't know. I can't help but ask you if you think
It is possible. It is possible. I mean, I can't tell you
you
for
can't know.
sure, but it would be
Yeah,
interesting to see and look through it
do a scan.
with a scan. Maybe we'll do that. That
Yeah,
would be very interesting to uncover these patterns, because that those patterns
yeah,
are really showing up in lineage. And I do work with a lot of people who are interested in that, what they carry and what comes, that because there's only so much that you can uncover through meditation or even
mm,
inquiry when it comes to these inherited patterns, because there's only so much you can dig to, because you're not aware what happened in generations before. You're just feeling off and you can't put a word to it or can't put a name to it. And that's why when these patterns resonate, and I can tell with the marker that comes next to it that this is not yours to carry. This is
mm,
something that you just happen to, velcroed to your consciousness over your lineage, developing and coming into this life. And then those are patterns that are very hard to shift without support of understanding and awareness and pointing out what is exactly going on in the picture. And that's when
mm,
frequency medicine can be very helpful. And I'm not saying that everybody have to rely on that, but some people don't have the emotional capacity or awareness to sit through hours of meditation to go to that place, or they maybe don't want to take a substance to go into ayahuasca or I don't know what else, or take a psychedelic, or go through these guided programs. So sometimes
mm,
we can get to it by this type of testing, and then we can have a talk about it um, in a in a very open and safe way without
mm,
being without having to work on it too much.
mm. Yeah. My other theory for myself was that even like having an abortion sort of like disrupted my whole identity and made me like way more grateful for the pregnancy after, because I'd experienced the other side of like being like, oh, this is too much. I don't want to be pregnant. And then stopping being pregnant and being like, actually, that was awful. I do want to be pregnant, even if I'm sick. But I did vomit for 14 weeks. So then I wasn't sure if that was, I expected after that I wouldn't vomit at all or something. I don't know. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it would be interesting to see what is
Yeah.
going on with that. But it's always, you carry out these things in your everyday life, and then the choices that you made, they were influenced by the patterns that you carry. And that's
Mm.
a very interesting knowledge to acquire.
I also read in your bio the emotion code. I had a friend that did emotion code and body code, and I didn't do the course, but I read the book, and I don't know whether I'm doing it properly, but I do it constantly throughout my day, and like especially with podcasts and social media, that I like, feel a bit like cringy or shy about something, and then I'll do emotion code and see sort of what emotions come up and where they came from, and it really helps me to, I don't know, get over it or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because it brings
Yeah.
it to the surface, and that's exactly what we do with I always make a custom remedy for the clients that I work with. So that custom remedy brings in all these frequencies that come up through testing. So certain emotions and things like that, when we use these remedies, they bring it up to surface, just like the emotion code. When you use the emotion code, you bring these emotions to your consciousness through the muscle testing that you do. So you get a second chance of processing them, and that's where a resolution lies, because you get a second chance, and then now your awareness is on it, and your situation and environment is safe and ready to move through this without interruption, without the emotional charge, without the environment being stressful or fully charged. And then it can really be released by a simple technique, just swiping through your governing vessel.
Mm. I've also found it useful if I'm like having an argument with my husband, and I'll like stop mid-argument and like do a bunch of emotions, and then I feel like I'm still like in the argument, still ready to talk about it, but suddenly I'm not like really triggered anymore, and I can just get back to like talking about what's happening now rather than feeling all this like. And my husband's like, "What are you doing? Stop! Stop your swaying!" And you're like,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
yeah.
Oh, my husband could tell you stories for days about the weird things that I do.
Uh, um, I would love for you to go through a couple of the posts that I reached out to you about when I saw you on Instagram. Like, I think one of the first ones I saw was about intestinal worms, and yeah, and like the different worms, what they mean, and yeah.
Yeah, that's a fascinating topic. I was very excited to dive into those when I was doing my research with the clients that I was working with. So I see a lot of children in my practice, and then I see all these resonating themes. So when it comes to parasites, and children are especially prone to come up with these themes, because parasites in general are usually a biological signal for these energetic boundary violations. So it's very, children perceive things differently than we do, and they, when they are controlled instead of being set free. So when we are leading them or parenting them with control rather than giving them the authority over their things, they perceive it sometimes as boundary violations, and then those would be um, the people who would be chronically depleted, and they would have a difficulty saying no. And that's not just for children, it's also for adults. And then they carry it into adulthood. And also the adults that have parasitic patterns, they don't feel safe to say no, and they also allow these patterns to come in and manifest in physical reality. So they are sometimes physically present, these worms. And I see people doing parasites cleanses and all these things to get these worms out, but that is a short-term solution. It's not really the answer for healing, because it doesn't take care of the root of the problem. Why was the parasite there in the first place?
Mm.
So when it comes to parasitic worms, it's usually like, we could go into each specific worm, but in general, there is a lot of I can't absorb, I can't digest this situation, that kind of theme going on, or I'm being attacked or invaded, or there is a lot of self-devaluation or not being able to defend themselves. That those are usually the themes that would go with parasitic infections, without going into specifics. Like pinworms, for example, they usually go into the pattern of sleep-related traumas. and something that had to do with that rest, and that rest wasn't allowed. And people who experience pinworms, especially children or adults, they have this perception that they can't rest because rest is not safe.
Mm. And then with children, so do you see it as they have had their own individual biological shock, or that they can just be mirroring their parents, or it's both?
A lot of times it's the parent, I have to say, but it is, they are their individual selves, so they are responding biologically, because we don't inherit just genetics. We inherit perception, and we inherit conditioning, and those are formed from the moment you are born. You are being treated in a certain way, and you are being in this energetic connectedness with your parents. So when you are in those vulnerable times, you take these energetic patterns on, and these conditionings on, and these perceptions on, and then those shape the physical manifestations, and the conflict shocks, and everything that can come after that, because they for example, self-devaluation can easily come from just perception alone, because your parents don't have a good outlook on life, and then you take on that conditioning for yourself, and you just view events the same way as your parents did. So
Mm.
it is their shock, but it is governed by their own it is governed by their own perception, but that perception was inherited.
Mm. Mm.
So that's the way I see it. It's not that they inherited conflicts, because that is in GNM, it's not really a thing. They inherit the perception that can create their own conflicts.
Mm. Yeah, so interesting. And then also with, I'm just curious with parasites. I think that when I learnt GNM, then I was like, oh, then you should never remove parasites, because it's like if they're there for a reason, then like removing them, like what if they're, I don't know, if they're the cleanup crew, or if they are doing something important. Do you think that? Like, do you, like when you said that it's a short-term solution, do you still think there's any validity in removing them, or?
It depends. I do believe that they are there for a reason, and I do believe that they are there to aid certain things. But sometimes, if you're also actively working on the emotional and energetic pattern resolution, then you can enhance healing while also doing those kinds of things. So it's not
Mm.
like you can't just do the parasite cleanse and expect yourself to heal. But if you're doing the other side of it, and it would make you feel better to
Mm.
eliminate those things faster than than just letting nature run its course, then it's the person's choice. I don't
Mm.
recommend parasite cleanses, because to me the body will always take care of itself in its own pace. So I like to allow the body to do it in its own pace, instead of rushing it, instead of intervening. But some people are making different choices, and they just, they are desperate to find solutions, and they're desperate to like really move through this phase. And then comes in a different part of it. Why are they so desperate? And what is
Mm.
behind that? What is that driving that desperation? Which is totally understandable, because anybody who has dealt with chronic symptoms wants to move out as fast and easy as possible. But there is patterns that are there to be seen too. And when we can um, find those patterns in the midst of chaos, is the best way to work through them. And then they can move into peace. And when they are in peace, their nervous system relaxes, and that allows for a deeper resolution to happen.
Mm. And what about things like insect bites or tick bites, or
Oh,
yeah.
there's a very interesting. I have a very interesting take on tick bites, mosquito bites, and insect bites in general, because I do believe that, as we said, each kind of organism also carries a specific frequency and a pattern. So they also resonate with um, the person. So some people get bitten more than others, because they also carry that that pattern that would bring those little insects in. But I see a lot of people with Lyme or Lyme disease, so-called, like the constellation of symptoms that they put under the umbrella term of Lyme, and they usually come up with um, betrayal, loss, abandonment, all these things happening at the same time. They usually bring up this constellation of symptoms that would point to Lyme disease, but they usually can be broken down to specific types of conflicts, like the muscle conflicts with self-devaluation, and then the fatigue with the healing phase and what is going on, and then neurological issues with the paralysis and that sensory conflicts, and the joint pain with the loss of movement. So there's a lot of things that go into these insect-borne illnesses, so-called. But the same thing with that we talked about with the parasites, bacteria and other organisms. They also carry their patterns. So I broke it down in a post on my page, how certain tick-related bacteria or intercellular parasites, what do they carry and what are they for? So there's a lot of nuance when it comes to this, and there's a lot of interesting insights where we can look into that and find more understanding of our patterns and symptoms.
Mm. And then do you think with like place specific things that it's like that in some places they just call a bunch of symptoms one thing and in another place they call it something else? Like I live in the tropics and we like lots of people talk about miliodosis, and I know that when I'm down south no one talks about that, but everyone talks about tick bites. And do you think like that there are different bacterias in different places, so then they name it different things, but you're sort of dealing with similar symptoms sometimes?
Well, if we
Or
come from the German New Medicine understanding, if the symptoms are the same, then the conflicts are the same. So it can be, as we know, that they can be, there could be different bacteria involved, and there could be different microbes present in the body, and then that's why they differentiate with when they do specific testing and they test for a certain bacteria, and then one shows up with this and the other one shows up with this, but the conflict is the same. The pattern could be very, very similar. Just because it's a different strain of bacteria, it could be just helping and aiding the same kind of conflict resolution.
yeah. And so another one that comes to mind is like when people travel and then they say that like they've got malaria or they've got whatever. I know that when my mum was pregnant with me, she went to Thailand and had dengue fever. And that was like a huge story of my upbringing. And then when I learnt German New Medicine, I was like, oh, wait, did she? Or did she have a big conflict resolution thing happen over there? Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of nuance when it comes to how we expose ourselves to different regions, and then whatever is there in terms of microbes. And then people say like, I got food poisoning when I went to Mexico, or all these kind of things that are happening. They could be explained through the GNM lens very easily, and usually it applies to the situation. Like I went to Aruba with my family, and we and I got food poisoning. Like I got sick, and my husband got sick, but my kids didn't. So how is that explainable if it's just the microbes alone? Because if it was just the microbes alone, then everybody would have been sick. So there has to be also, in the way I see it, is that I was prone to contract that energy or that kind of microbe because I was carrying the patterns that it needed to attach to. And my kids didn't. And my husband did, but my kids didn't. So that's how I see it from the energetic perspective. And then when we layer in GNM and we understand what we went through with my husband right before the our travels, then it makes even more sense.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, so interesting. I went to India and I got sick one night, and I remember I remember thinking about it because I just learnt GNM afterwards and thinking like, I remember there was a specific moment when I was eating where I was like, should I be here? Is this a safe place to be? Like, and then I walked home and was really sick, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting when you know German New Medicine that you see your whole life through,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and
a
then
different lens.
also we carry a lot of fear because we are hearing all about these uh places that we go to, like Africa or India, and then you hear that, or Mexico, that you, when you go there, you will get sick, so don't drink the water.
Mm,
So what happens if you happen to ingest some water, and then you immediately start to go into that pattern of thought that, oh, now I'm going to get sick, and then yeah, there is a lot of
mm,
conflicts with it. So for example, if you start vomiting, then the thought of you ingesting that water, that was
mm,
alone an indigestible morsel conflict,
mm,
because you don't want that water within you, so you have to expel it.
mm. Yeah, I guess another interesting one that comes up is vaccines, and like that people have so many theories about yeah, about vaccines, but it's like impossible to know because people have so many feelings about vaccines and
Yeah, I
yeah.
work a lot. Like right now, I work extensively with the autistic communities, and those are very well connected in the mainstream
Mm,
to vaccines, and that it induced by vaccines, and then there is a correlation, which I don't deny that could be. It's more just when we understand what the subconscious is trying to communicate, and it is beautiful how it plays out with these nonverbal children, for example, that I work with, that they are for the first time understood. And it is beautiful for the family to witness that what their child has been trying to communicate all this time. So when it
mm,
comes to vaccines and all, of what I do usually is I do a homeopathic version of vaccine processing, and that, I don't really involve GNM there, but we understand that autism is a gene, is a constellation of conflicts. So we can work through that, but we can also understand what else is at play. And when we see the vaccine, when we see it as a vaccine injury, we could test which vaccine was the one that was um, playing a role in this, and then which exact ingredient was playing a role in this, and what pattern did that carry, and how can we translate that into the person's story, or a child's story, and the family's story. And once we understand that, it's a beautiful understanding that we get, and then the family finally can move on and move forward, instead of being stuck in that pattern, that there's no relief, there's no communication, we can't get through to this child, we can't understand what they are going through. So finally they are understood, and it's a whole new world being opened up. And now there's a shift in the parents, and the shift in the child, and that alone will create some of these conflicts that are causing the constellation to lift, and they
mm,
can move out of the constellation, because it's no longer locked in their brain. So it is only maybe happening on one side of the brain, and because of these shifts, the conflicts can no longer happen the same way. So resolution is on the way, because that's how we move out of these constellations in German New Medicine, that we resolve one side, and then if at least one side is resolved, then the other side is, then the person moves out of the constellation.
mm,
So we create a perception shift in the parents that will create a totally different experience in the everyday life of a child. And when that happens, the child can move out, because with enough evidence that it's no longer the same, they don't feel the same energetic pattern inflicted onto them, then they can safely move on.
mm. Yeah, I think there's so much as well that goes into like what would make you vaccinate your child. Like my son had one vaccine when he was 10 months old, and I didn't want to, but I don't know, got afraid, got fearmongered by some family and did it. And I felt like, like it was like the holding him down and like letting someone hurt him, when it's like up until now it's like been my job to like nurture and protect you, and now I'm going to hold you down while someone sticks a needle into your leg. And
Yeah.
then also what was going on with me, that I was afraid of like outside particles, that then what kind of sort of perception am I mothering him with in general, like versus when I don't feel like that anymore, and then it's like I'm not like holding him down to to try to do something, but
Yeah.
um yeah, I know it's just the one that always still, like, I still have so many people that message me and tell me about like.
It is traumatic for a child, and it also
Yeah.
traumatic it's traumatic for the mother to go through that. And when we look at, for example, what we talked about mercury, um, uh, that it kind of goes through that boundary violation, and it goes also into that betrayal and
Mm,
loss of trust. So now you can see that every vaccine, or most of the vaccines, they contain mercury. And then when we are going through, if it's perceived, the whole vaccination process is perceived by the child that this is a betrayal and this is a loss of trust, because why would they hurt me? Then
mm,
they have a possibility, a higher possibility to hold on to the mercury, because it's the same pattern.
mm. And I did feel better when I found German New Medicine, because I think after that I felt like, oh, I've damaged him and like this is forever and I've done something terrible and I poisoned him and blah blah blah. And then I think when I found German New Medicine, I felt like, oh, it was a traumatic thing, but we can, yeah, like, can heal.
Yeah,
we can
yeah, and the
we
body
can
takes care of itself. It's the only thing that the best empowering um, thing for me was from German New Medicine, that it our body takes care of itself, and our job is basically just to um, move through these life events and not view them as conflicts. And also with mother and child, if I just support my child and be present, then they are less likely to perceive anything as conflict, because they are no longer in isolation, which is one of the main criteria for a conflict shock. So children are less getting less into less conflicts if they are fully supported by their parents, and they are fully and their parents are fully there and present, and helping them to process their everyday life. So when there is that trust, then they are less prone to any kind of conflict and adaptation per se.
What do you think about teeth stuff? Teeth is another one where I feel like in lots of GNM groups that I'm in, everyone says like bite conflict, but people don't have much. So what do you do if you've got a bite conflict? Like, do you go to the dentist? Like, what do you have
Yeah.
any,
So
do you work
I
with
have a
people?
very, very fascinating take on teeth, because each and every tooth is also a representation of something energetically. So when we see which tooth and which side of the tooth, is it more like a towards the inner side or the outer side, is that experiencing some kind of adaptation, like cavity or anything, or discoloration, or loss of receding gums or anything like that is happening in the mouth. We can translate that bit with that map of which tooth is holding what kind of energetic patterns. So, for example, the front teeth is mother and father. So, if you have crooked teeth in the front, then you look at which one, and then you look at your relationship with your mother or your mother's lineage, and how mothers were treated in your entire ancestral line. And then when you look into that, you can really get a glimpse of why is that tooth crooked, and what is happening there. And then you connect it with the bite conflict too. And then there is also different kinds of tooth carry different kinds of archetypical behaviors and patterns. So when we look into those, it's very interesting what story it tells us, so we can understand the deeper explanation of that bite conflict. So it's no longer just about the bite. It's about your relationship with your father. It's about your relationship with your work, with your career and work, or your authenticity, or your purpose. So when you look into each tooth, you get to know a deeper level of story, and that opens the door for resolution.
Mm. Do you have a theory about gaps in between your two top middle teeth?
That could be as well, if you see that, if we take into consideration that the first front tooth is mother and father, then how
Mhm.
is the relationship between mother and father? And how did
Mm,
you perceive your parents' relationship while you were growing up,
mm,
or
mm.
when you were
Yeah.
coming in? Like, how was that playing out? And then you might find some answers in that story.
Yeah, that's interesting. Just yeah, my parents broke up when I was 1, but my mum also has a gap, and then whenever I meet other people with a gap teeth, that's just something that I notice because I have a gap in my teeth. But
Yeah.
yeah,
So it could
yeah.
be as well that maybe your mother was carrying some patterns too, that they have that maybe they had ancestors that also had broken relationships.
Mm. Yeah, it's so fascinating.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah. I do also I know when I was in India, one thing that I noticed was that people had such different faces. Like it was something that really stuck out to me when I was there. It was that like it at first it was like people had what I would call deformities. And then the longer I was there, it sort of became like, oh, people just have different faces. And I just think it's really interesting, not super related to what we're talking about, but when I see on Instagram a lot with like filters and everything, it's like everyone is becoming more and more same. And yeah, like I don't know, trying to get
Yeah,
rid
because
of
we're
all the
moving more
differences.
away. We're trying to desperately fit in because everybody has this collective sense of a lack of belonging. So when we are trying to be similar to each other, we kind of feel that sense of belonging a little bit closer, but it's not real. It's perceived, and it's kind of a masking of this underlying sense of not belonging. So when
Mm,
we address that, and then authenticity can come out, because authenticity means that we honor our differences and we are sharing who we truly are, and we are not afraid of judgment, because we know that we are inherently loved and we are inherently accepted. We are inherently belonging, and that when you understand that, then you don't need the filters. Then you don't need to chase the look, and
mm,
how you need to look in this life to be considered attractive or considered in a certain way, because it doesn't matter anymore.
mm. It also makes me think of KCT conflicts, and is like, a f- I don't know, is that just part of modern life that everyone feels like abandoned and alone? Because yeah,
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 KCT is I love the kidney scan that I run for people, because it's
mm,
usually really revealing all those patterns that are going into that. And then everybody has KCT to some extent, and some
mm,
people have it more and some people have it less, but for what I've seen, everybody has one version or the other of it, and it
mm,
just different on some people, how they learned how to cope with it, or how they learned how to um, live with it or mask it, or it's maybe not as deep or doesn't run as deep in their lineage, that it comes to full force or full surface. And it depends as well what else they carry,
mm,
and that can amplify other conflicts and vice versa. So
mm. A friend
really
was
interesting.
sort of expressing like anger the other day at her sort of symptoms because she was feeling like, like my body's like, in the GNM lens, it's like I've got this conflict because of this perception, but having this conflict makes me feel more like this, like, being having and I think that's sometimes something that's difficult to get your head around with German New Medicine. It's just like, like why would a motor conflict make me paralyzed? Like, how is that going to help me move? And like, and I guess it's like, I don't know, because we're,
Well, it's kind of like it has to stop you in order for you to find a solution so you can move.
mm,
That's the way I see it, because there's a biological solution. Because if you are in conflict, that means there is a problem. The body has to move through that problem biologically and find a solution. So the same way, like if I'm devaluing myself, then my body will break down my bones so it can build better bones. But it has to do the destructive pattern first in order to build up again, or find a solution, or find like a better way for you to move. It kind of has to paralyze you in order to kind of find a solution and help you move forward.
mm, mm,
Yeah. There's a story with every single one. And then with KCT as well, I always say that we heal best in connection, and that is what we are in modern society are losing so easily and so much. We don't really have communities anymore. We don't really have those trusted circles that we maybe used to have in the past, or in past generations, or our ancestors had better access to, because they had a village, because they had all the dynamics with it. But we are hiding and we are isolating because we don't want to show our true struggles, because we are afraid that we will be judged. So that creates more isolation, and that creates more
mm,
abandonment, and that creates more and more of the same pattern and conflict. So everybody's exhausted, everybody's gaslit, everybody's dismissed and burned out, and then that only leads to even more of a load.
mm. Yeah. How old are your children?
7. My son is turning 7 this weekend, and my daughter is 8. So they are a year and a half apart.
Yeah. Um, I don't know, it's probably an obvious and big question, but how do you feel like your work has affected your parenting, and like what do you tell them about health, and
Oh, they're
how do
very
you talk to
aware
them?
of how I perceive how I work with things. So they usually, um, you know, kind of move through their fevers and other things in a very trusting way, which I love, because my daughter is just like, okay, well, I have a fever. I'll be better tomorrow. It doesn't really affect me. I know that my body's doing the right thing. And I try to raise them with the awareness that their body is amazing, and that everything is happening for their own greater good. And my
Mm,
son, he had this severe eczema, so he went through a lot of pain. And then while he was going through it, I didn't have this outlook. I had the holistic paradigm outlook on things, so that things will hurt you, that this you have to avoid this, and you can't eat this and can do this because it will hurt you. So it was a very destructive pattern, and we're working through him kind of stepping back into that freedom, that his
mm,
body is amazing, and it can protect him, and his skin was doing what it had to do to show us what he was holding, and now it doesn't have to anymore, and he's safe. So I can see, because I scan my children too, so I can see the patterns that they are carrying, and it's beautiful that I can guide them through it, because I see how my son has this deeper um, loss of trust, and he doesn't trust that things are safe, so he compensates for it with outbursts and lashes out, and then he has this frustration constantly within, because he doesn't know how to deal with this. So I see what is happening, and I'm much more present as a parent as a result of what I know. Then if I didn't know these things, I would be looking for the next therapist, or looking for the next remedy, and looking for, how can I fix this, when I know that nothing needs fixing. It just needs to be held, and it needs to be seen, and supported through. And connection will heal everything. And that's how I try to navigate things in my family, that when there is something coming up, as a physical manifestation of disease, or discomfort, then I always go, okay, where are we not aligned with our biology? Where are we not aligned with our truth? And what happened in my kids' life too, that, okay, what did they perceive in a certain way, and what did they understand as a conflict? Because when I see, okay, my son is having a digestive issue, then I go with that. And then we have a conversation about it, because at this age, at 7 and 8, they are fully capable of having conversation in their own language and with their own understanding. And then when we move through things and they feel better, it's just um then we are just going through the phase of, okay, now you understand, and now you know the story, and now we can allow the body to do what it does, and we no longer
Mm.
have to make it mean anything. We're just going to take a deep rest, and we're going to stay home, and then we're going to connect and snuggle, and we're going to move past it.
Mm. Mm. And do you feel like, do you have a community, do you have a wider community or village that sort of agrees or supports that outlook? I just, sometimes my son comes home from like his grandparents' place and he's like, we need to wash our hands. And he's like, there's lots of germs. And I'm like, what? When? Where did you get this? But yeah.
Yeah, it's very hard with living with this outlook, because I see a lot of people who are stuck in other patterns and other paradigms, and I unfortunately don't have a big community locally. I rely on a lot of internet friends to
Mm.
kind of feel that I belong somewhere, and then I have that I'm working through that pattern within me, because I kind of, it is very hard when you don't have it
Mm.
physically present. And then I'm going into play dates, and then I with my kids' school, and they are coming home and saying that this person has this kind of virus, and I'm like, oh well, you're not necessarily submitting to that, but I also don't want them to be the ones who are kind of going into their school and saying germs don't exist, or like
Mm.
they don't cause disease. And I just try to educate them the way I can. And then for me, that's my only responsibility, is towards them. And then as
Mm.
long as they are understanding of what is happening, and they are taught not to belittle or ridicule anyone else who believes a
Mm.
different thing, then they can coexist and they can be happily together. They don't have to argue about what is healthy, what is not
Mm.
healthy, what is happening in the body while when they have a fever. If the other person or the other child is curious, then they could talk about it. But if not, we're not pushing our beliefs on other people in any way. I wish that more people came to the awakening, and that is one of my purposes these days, to kind of bring this out to a local community, and in the hopes of more people waking up to it. But it's not as easy as it sounds,
Mm.
because I know it
Yeah, I
took me a big shift to embrace this. And my mother was involved in the GNM community for 15 years. So I had all the exposure that I over the years that I could get, because she was kind of, as you say, shoving it down my throat every second she could, she could, or every chance she could. But it wasn't registering. So I feel like everybody has a time and place to wake up to these kind of things, and it will make sense to them when they're ready.
Mm.
And our job is to kind of speak up about it, as much as we can, but not in a pushy way,
Mm,
or not in a way that is it sounds any way um, judgmental towards the
mm,
other person's journey, because everybody lives by their own truth.
mm. Yeah. Sometimes I have friends that are like, "Oh, you should be more upfront about German New Medicine." In like, I feel like I'm still sort of conscious of like if my kids are coughing, to not go to certain play dates, just because I remember when my son was a baby and I was really frightened of people coughing, and I felt really like offended if someone would come near my tiny baby when they're coughing, and I still like remember that so much. So even though I don't believe in it anymore, I sort of feel like, oh, like, yeah, there's certain places we don't go when we're healing because people are scared. Yeah,
Yeah, people
it's
people are
yeah.
scared, and then obviously there is a sense of respect that we are carrying within us too. That okay, well, I know that we are not a threat, but they
Mm,
don't, and then I
mm,
can't be disrespectful because like if my child has a fever, I can't just bring him to whatever play date just because I know that it's not a
mm,
threat. Because
mm,
it is we are living in these social dynamics that we are navigating through, and it's part of it. But I see
thank
what
you.
you're saying with the babies and newborns and what they are subjected to and whatnot. And I grew up with my mother wasn't. We lived very biologically without knowing. She
Mm,
wasn't aware of these, but she was like, "Okay, well, if you're gonna be dirty, be dirty." And we didn't have to wash our hands all the time. We didn't have to do things all the time, and we didn't. We weren't sick a lot, so I guess it worked.
mm. That's another thing I noticed. Like, I know that I have some friends who don't have any interest in German New Medicine, but they're just relaxed people. Like, they just don't really get bothered about many things. And then I have other friends who do know about German New Medicine, but they're still very scared about everything. And sometimes I think like, yeah, like you don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs
And
if
then there
you,
is the
yeah.
part where people who are hyper aware of German New Medicine, and then
Mm,
they get into these loops of that there's always a conflict to chase, that there's always a
mhm,
resolution to have, or there's always a transformation to be experienced, and they get into that, and then I understand the pattern because we are um, it's hard to lay back and say, okay, body, take over, do whatever you need to, because it's all about our conditionings and patterns of how we perceive things. So there is the deeper work that needs to be done, because yeah, it's easy to get caught up with chasing the conflicts and the constellations. Don't even get me started on those. Like, what is my behavior telling me about? Like, where's my brain lighting up today? What is
mm,
happening? Where is the scale tipping today? It's
mm.
always
Yeah.
something to analyze.
Yep, no, I've definitely been there too. I remember when I first found Germany medicine, I was like, "Oh, everything's great. You don't need to be scared about anything." And then after a little bit, I was like, "Oh my God, you got to be scared about everything because everything's a conflict." And then like, "Oh no, wait, just
Yeah.
relax." But yeah, it's a
And that's the
constant back
way
and forth.
for example, with my children, is that when I understand the three criteria of GNM, and one is isolation, if I just take care of the connection, then conflicts can't happen.
Hmm. No, that
So
is
then
such
you
good
don't have to
advice.
worry about the conflicts, or what kind of event happens to your child. Because if, for example, if something they experience an event and they live it as a an indigestible morsel, when they come home right after, or when they speak to you right after, you are providing them with the space where it can be expressed and processed and resolved. So even if they were in that conflict active phase for, I don't know, a couple of hours, it will cycle out as a little fever or a little constipation or a little, maybe uh, depending on what severity it had for them and how they perceived it. But it will cycle out, and then you no longer need to be afraid because you're
Mm,
taking care of it because you are connecting.
that's such a good reminder for our children and for ourselves, I think, to
Yeah. And that's why
yeah.
community is so important, because if we have the community, then we are going through these conflicts and we are able to speak to someone about it, then we are able to process it. But sometimes we get ashamed of our own conflicts and we don't even bring it out because I can't speak about this, or what will people think?
Yeah, thank you. All right. I was just going to ask you quickly about human design because you mentioned that you are 4/6, and so am I. Have you do you work with human design, or is that just an interest? Or
Superficially, I'm not an expert. I have to say, I'm fascinated by it, and I wish I was an expert in a lot of ways
Mm.
because I do use it in my parenting a lot because I understand what my children's profile is and what their design is, and then it kind of helps to see what they are and how they operate, and then it doesn't put me in the loops of questioning, like, why is it not working, why are they not responding the same way I do, because they
Mm.
are different, they're built differently and they have a different design. So I use that, human design a lot in my parenting and my relationships as well, to understand, and also how I operate. It was very eye-opening for me. Yes.
Mm.
So I'm a manifesting generator. I think it shows as well in the amount of modalities and frameworks that I kind of dabbled into over the years, because I jump from one place to another all the time. And some of them I have finished mastering, and some of them I took whatever I was interesting for me, and then I moved on. And it stuck with me, whatever it had to, and then I no longer have to hold on to it because it served its purpose.
Mm. And also, just a sixth line. Do you see the sixth line pattern in your life when you look back? Like, I found that really fascinating too. Before I knew human design, I was into astrology, and I'd always been really like interested in a Saturn return because 30 felt like a big, like a, before I was 30, I felt like something's going to shift at 30. And then when I was 30, things did shift. And then when I learned human design, I was like, oh, it's not just a Saturn return. It's also my human design to sort of,
Yeah. How
yeah.
do you see the six carrying out in your design?
Um, well, I'm 33, so I'm sort of just into my next phase. But I do feel like the first 30 years was crazy and was a lot of trial and error and and it has been interesting that sort of since like I know it's also like I had my son when I was 27, so a lot of shifts came with that. But yeah, it did feel like a real sort of like a different life, and like there's something totally different that started after that. But yeah.
Yeah, same for me. I had my daughter when I was 28, and then my son when I was nearly 30. And yeah, it's a huge shift. There are shifts that are happening there for sure.
Mm. I'm excited for 2027 to see what happens to the world and yeah.
But yeah, well, I'm all excited too. There's so
Yeah.
many amazing shifts that are coming, and yeah, we're in for a
Yeah.
treat.
Also, just with the autistic children and nonverbal, did you listen to that, or are you interested in that telepathy tapes and like
Yeah.
the
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, I found it fascinating, and that was one of the reasons why I was really I started to work with a lot of autistic children, because I was like, oh
Mm.
my God, it makes so much sense that
Mm.
they are like, we can communicate with them if we communicate with their subconscious, because they are using that energetic um, connection between themselves already. And now if we can, as non autistic individuals, if we can tap into that, there's an amazing world to be discovered, and how we can understand each other. So yeah, the telepathy tapes was very, very interesting for me to listen
Mm.
to. And then there was this part where they were talking about um, the mercury and the heavy metals, and how they are conductors of these energetic waves for these children. So if they are holding on to these patterns, and their bodies are carrying these metals, then those are amplifying their senses. to
Wow.
really tap into these energetic waves that are going on, the thought patterns, the frequencies. So now it makes sense how these these children and these autistic individuals, they hold on to these metals because that is their only way to communicate better.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't get up to that bit. I'll have to go back and listen to more. That is
Well, they
so
didn't talk about
interesting.
this bit. This is
Oh,
my own spin because I
oh,
was talking
okay,
with a
yeah.
with another person about this whole pattern, and
Yeah.
what was mentioned in the telepathy tapes was this person who had a filling, and he it was a mercury filling, and whenever he was passing a certain area with a car, his he was able to pick up the radio frequencies because there was an
Mm,
antenna in that area, and he was hearing music without the radio on. And so that was kind of leading me into the conversation with this other person who was very into telepathy tapes and autistic communities and working with them. So we had this discussion about how interesting this is because it really opens up the possibility of why these children and adults and individuals are holding on to all these metals.
mm.
So it's fascinating.
It is so fascinating. I guess what made me think about that was the human design and like Ra's 2027 thing and the Ray of Children. And I think that, like I guess in one way there's like this narrative of like I don't know, of like vaccines and the food's bad and that's why and that's causing behavioral changes and there's something negative about that. And then even from like Ra's human design perspective, it's like, no, this is like he predicted this ages ago as like the evolution of humankind and like not
Yeah.
as a negative, but just as the way that we're going. And yeah,
Yes.
so fascinating.
And everything is energy. So it only makes sense that we communicate in frequency too. We lost that ability.
Mm,
Um, and these children, they possess that ability. They regain that ability through their adaptations that they're carrying. And it is really how we are meant to communicate. Everybody has this capacity to use telepathic powers. It's just we are too conditioned to believe that we don't have it anymore. And we
mm,
forgot how to use it. And we don't tap into it because we are too consumed in surface level things like our own conditionings that are
mm.
masking this authentic expression of ourselves. Because we only use a fraction of our abilities as humans. And yeah,
Have you heard of Dr. Edith Chan and her work with like no?
maybe no, doesn't ring a bell right now. Maybe I did.
No.
Maybe I read a lot
Um
of books. It doesn't stand out as of now. What
I
is this?
I I found her on Instagram or through a podcast, but she did a course a few years ago that a number of people that I follow took, and it was to bend a spoon. That was like the, and then she's been doing classes with children to learn to see blindfolded and
Yeah.
all the, yeah, apparently like I heard her say it's like we're on a planet where people don't swim and these kids have just learned how to swim and it's like it's something that everyone has, but it's like so far people have just forgotten how to use it or something. And yeah,
It
yeah,
makes
so
perfect
interesting.
sense because I'm right there with you with the whole and it connects as well how we lost our ability to live biologically, because
Mm,
if we live biologically, let's say as women, if we live true to our design as our feminine essence, then we would be able to use that intuitive power that we used to have in our that is given to us, as it's our birthright to have that feminine intuition. But because we are losing this connection to ourselves, because we are trying to fit into modern life and what is expected of us and how we are conditioned to be, and what is our role as a woman and how we are meant to be, or what men or society or culture designs us to be, then we lose our intuition. And intuition is all about energy. It's all about feeling into those frequencies and learning how to transmute that and communicate that. with clarity.
Yeah, so true. Um, do you have any differences in how you, sorry, I ask everyone this because maybe I'm just curious, but do you have any differences in how you approach your son and daughter, like from a G&M lens or from as like boys and girls?
Yes, I just went through the Freya course with Dr. Sasha,
Mm,
and I recently finished. So it was very eye-opening for me to see how differently we are wired. And I didn't treat my son and daughter differently before that, but right now I'm going through this transition of, okay, so I have to show up differently for my daughter, and I have to show up differently for my son, because my son needs me in a different capacity, in a different manner. I'm raising a son, and I'm raising a daughter, and they are two different beings, not just with their individuality, but with their biology, and
mm,
I can't treat them the same way
mm,
if I understand how they are designed.
mm. I remember I really thought that there was no difference until I had a boy and a girl, and I was like, whoa, they are pretty different. Like, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm so fascinated by your work. I will
Thank
have to
you.
look into it. Where can people, I recommend everyone going and looking at your Instagram page for all of the details of those posts we talk about and how, yeah, how do people work with you? How do they book a session?
Yeah, so I work remote. I work with people all over the world, so it doesn't have to be local. I work through a hair sample. So the bioenergetic testing side is done through a hair sample that could be sent in an envelope from any part of the world, and then by mail. So I use that hair sample to do the scanning process, and then we would meet to discuss the results, and that's basically how I start working with people. And then we go through the what the plan is to based on whatever showed up and what the big picture is. And once we discuss that, we are able to formulate some kind of a plan to use somatic inquiry or whatever else resonated through the process, because I also make a very customized, very individualized approach when it comes to healing. And there's not, it's not a supplement protocol. It's more like what your body communicated with your subconscious as the best need for the best support tools that would be beneficial for you at that time. So it could be any kind of biohacks, any kind of things that because fasting or cold plunging and all these things they have their time and place. So they're not always the same for each person.
Forgot to ask you about fasting. Can you can you give more That's such a big, that's such an interesting one because
Yeah.
yeah, can you talk a little bit more about that, about when fasting is supportive and when it's not, and the sort of the patterns and yeah.
Yeah, so fasting could be, it's like it could be an act of discipline, but it also could be an unconscious form of punishment. It depends on what kind of patterns the person carries. So if the person has some kind of patterns of issues with nourishment, or something that starvation, for example, that they are having this scarcity pattern, those people won't respond well to fasting, and it will create a further spiraling of unhealthy patterns to move, like adaptations in the liver, and because the liver responds to your sense of nourishment. And so for people who don't carry those patterns, they carry different ones, fasting can be very beneficial because it would help the body to kind of focus on what it needs to. But if you carry that sense of starvation and lack of nourishment, in any sense, it doesn't have to be physical nourishment. It could be the perceived nourishment that you are, like, you're not nourishing yourself. That's why women don't do very well with fasting, because a lot of women have a pattern or a problem nourishing themselves on a soul level. And that parallel will be triggered by physical fasting.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
there is always a time and place for everything. And some
Mm.
people, especially women, I don't really see them being see it being beneficial, the same way as for women it usually isn't beneficial to do cold plunges or ice baths, because it triggers a certain memory or pattern that is not very pleasant for women to be at. Like that freeze pattern that maybe is carried from generations that they had to endure through, that they have to stay in place and they can't move, and then they're paralyzed or they're frozen. And when those ancestral patterns are reignited through ice baths, they kind of have a negative effect on the nervous system.
Mm. Thank you so much. Sorry to pull you up on that at the end. I was just remembered.
Yeah, there's
I
always
think that,
trouble.
yeah, I just think that's so interesting because I just think that that was one of the biggest shifts for me in the total way that I saw health. Was I feel like I had this view of like that it should be as hard as possible. It's like, like fast and don't eat and then like detox all the bad things out of you and like exercise a lot and like do all this sort of stuff. And I realized that it all came from a sort of lens of punishment of like, take away everything you like and do the hardest thing possible, and that will somehow give you results, to understanding this different view of like, oh, if you like provide as much nourishment and safety and comfort as possible, then your body will just do what it needs to do. Yeah, that was just a huge sort of perceptual shift for me and how I viewed health. So yeah.
Yeah, because you keep your body in stress. It's a form of
Mm.
punishment. It's like you have that pattern maybe that goes into that I can only get ahead if I sacrifice myself, or if I
Mm.
punish myself, or if I suffer. That's the
Mm.
only way to get to things. And that is a deeper conditioning. Once you liberate that, then you can move into that I can actually feel good because I nourish myself. I can feel good because I rest. I
Mm.
can feel good because my worth doesn't come from doing. My worth, I just can, I can just be and heal.
Mm. Mm. Yeah. Again, thank you so much. I will have your um,
Yeah.
links in the show notes. Everyone, go check it out. I'm I'm so fascinated. I want to send you my hair. So,
I know. Yeah, we could arrange that. We could
yeah.
totally arrange that. And as I mentioned, I do these specialty scans too. So if anybody has these very targeted questions of what is going on in my kidneys or what is going on in my digestive system because they've been dealing with an indigestible thing for a long time, we could definitely look into those and see what can be done to, or how can we really see the bigger picture for them to move forward, because it's not really about doing anything. It's about coming to awareness and shifting patterns.
Mm. Mm.
I
So
also
with
have a second.
I was going to say, do you test and scan children, or do you just work on their parents?
I do test children too, but sometimes if it's a really chronic or really severe issue, I usually ask the parent to like include a sample of their own too, just in case. So it's not necessarily an extra cost. It's just I like to see for children to that what is going on, what are the overlapping patterns, so I can help especially for very small children or infants. It's very helpful because those are the little babies especially, they're very much in tune with their mothers, and
Mm.
they are energetically very intertwined. So when we understand the mother, and then I usually just kind of combine the two, because there's only so much that they can shift in a baby, because
Mm.
the baby cannot be going through somatic inquiry. It's usually the
Mm.
mom that has to kind of take on those or peel down those layers of conditioning, and so they can help their children move through it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also have this program that I just started with a very dear colleague and friend of mine, Anna, that we are combining hair tissue mineral analysis and my kind of hair testing when it comes to bioenergetic testing. And we are doing these, combining the physical with the energetic, and then taking a real full picture approach and seeing what the minerals are doing, seeing what the heavy metals and everything is bringing up, and then focusing on the energetic side of it. So it's kind of like a full decoding kind of package that we've
Mm.
worked on.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I'll go look at that too. All right.
Yeah. Well, we could definitely
Yeah,
chat after this if you feel called to do this kind of work, but there's a lot of interesting things to reveal for sure.
yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. It was lovely to meet you.
Yeah, and me too.
All
It
right.
was so nice to connect. So you and anybody else who is interested, they can find me on Instagram and they can always reach out. I'm happy to chat.
Thanks for listening to Here on Earth. I hope today's conversation gave you something to think about. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and leave a review. You can find me on Instagram at hereonearth_podcast. Until next week, I hope you enjoy your time here on Earth.